Sir, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
We've been waiting for a few years to have you over,
Yes,
and it's such a pleasure to have you here.
thank you. It's a pleasure for me to be here also.
Dr. Pema, I want to track back right from, we've talked about so many different things off the record. I want to start off by mentioning about a very fascinating country that we love and we look up to as well when it comes to biodiversity, when it comes to climate change, when it comes to working towards a happier nation, about your nation and about Bhutan. And also, you were born in Bhumthang. I was reading up a little bit about that.
Right.
Share a little bit about where you were born.
Well, Boomthang literally means the valley of the vase. So it's a vase-shaped valley, and that is the name of the district. I was born in a village called Pralang in the Tang Valley. This is part of Boomthang. And people who visit Tang Valley, are really, impressed with the scenic beauty of that valley. So it's also a historical valley. So I was very privileged to be born there into a farming family. My family, like all other families there, sorry, used to own a few heads of cattle, few heads of yaks, some sheep, and some horses, of course, and then also poultry birds. So we grew up in a subsistent farming, system. So we used to do a little bit of everything. So those days when we were young, everything was quite predictable. The seasons have a rhythm. We know when to expect winter. We also knew when to expect summer and spring and autumn. And we also knew what kind of farming routine will have to be carried out during a particular time. Now all that seems to have changed over the last several decades. So I grew up in the mountains. I was born in the mountains. Now I am working for the mountains.
Yeah, that's exactly something that I was about to go ahead and touch base on. Glaciers are sinking, unpredictable water flow, degrading ecosystems, not completely, but starting to degrade ecosystems from what I understand. Rising temperatures and, again, natural disasters are left, right, and center. When you were growing up in Bhutan, did you ever imagine that this is what it's going to come towards? And when did you when did you decide that, all right, let me work towards this, let me work towards the climate, let me work towards sustainability, let me work towards agriculture, because at one point of your life, you were the Minister of Agriculture in Bhutan, if I'm not mistaken, for 5 years, I believe.
Yes, thank you for that question. Very important question. The changes. See, when we were in school, I went to a school nearby. That time we had no roads. The roads just came to my village some 20 years ago. And electricity came only in 2008. You can imagine, the kind of setting that grew up. Of course, I didn't stay there all the time. I went to school and then I went to universities abroad.
That is your village, if I'm not mistaken, along that line.
No.
Not your village, but Bhumthang.
That's one village in Bumtang, but
Okay.
not exactly
Not your
there,
village,
not
but
my
a village in
No,
Bhumthang.
yes.
Okay.
Okay. Right. So, I never heard, or some people never taught us. Our teachers never taught us about climate change and ecosystem degradation and all these issues and challenges that we are, facing now. For example, I never imagined that we'll have to drink water from pet waters. We used to go to the spring, drink straight from the pond or from the spring water. And that used to be the case. I never imagined that we would come to a stage when we have to, have drinking water in bottles. So that's one example. Now, just one memory that always I carry with me is the river in front of my village, the Tang River. It used to get frozen, in winter altogether. And I remember, my, elder siblings going down to the river banks to collect fish in the morning
Ah.
Yeah, because they've, half frozen, half eaten fish by the otters. So by the time the otters could eat the fish, it gets frozen, and so it just lives there. So those, we used to remember, collecting those fish. But now we don't see the river getting frozen at all. Forget that, we don't see ice around the village. So these are, some vivid memories. And of course, we complain about cold now, but I think compared to what we used to, the
In
conditions we used to have, so now it is really warm.
Things have changed.
Things have changed. Yeah.
In the past 3 to 4 decades, how did things escalate this much, sir?
Well, of course, in our setting, we never related it to industrialization, to what happened 200 years ago or so. But I think a lot of things have escalated in the last 30 years or so. If you look at the rate of glacier melting, it happened in the last 30 years. The pace of melting has really increased.
Since 90s?
So, yeah, since the 90s, in the last 30 years or so. Yeah, but it was happening gradually before, but not that intensely.
I straight want to dive into a few things right away. Let me retrack back and talk a little bit about ICIMOD. 41.5 years
Yes,
ago, right? 41,
years,
almost
yes,
42 years of
yes.
ICIMOD in Nepal.
Yes.
Having, taking care of, let's say, working towards 8 different countries
yes.
and thousands of kilometers of mountains. Let me put it that way.
Right.
3,500, as
Yeah,
you
around
mentioned,
that,
right?
Yes.
The inception of ICIMOD, Dr. Pema, if you want to share that story.
Well, actually, ICIMOD was conceived at one time as one of the CG institutions, the group of agriculture research institutions that have been created in the 80s, or in the late 70s. So there was an idea to establish one institution dedicated to mountains. And but somehow this did not come through. So UNESCO actually came up with the idea. And, and together with the governments of Nepal, Switzerland, and Germany, then decided to, establish ICIMOD. So it was formally, it formally came into existence in 1983.
It says that science, policy, and knowledge, and humans
Yes.
come together. Would you elaborate that a little bit?
Yes, ICIMOD actually is a unique organization, and I think I don't see many organizations with that kind of interesting mandate. Because ICIMOD is an institution where we can bring science, policy, and practice together. So most institutions are either dedicated to research,
Yes.
or to policy, or to technology development. But ICIMOD can work across all this, spectrum. So our role is, linking scientific evidence to policies and to practices on the ground. So that gives us a very wide space to work with. So linking science to policy and practice, in a nutshell, that is our mandate.
How has it been for 41 and a half years in Nepal and across the region? To summarize it.
Yes, I think ICIMOD did make its contribution in terms of creating the level of understanding about mountain issues, the challenges the mountain communities are facing, and also is one organization which serves as a neutral convener for bringing together scientists, policymakers, bureaucrats, practitioners, farmers, students together to discuss about common issues, common challenges. Because look at the issues that we are discussing now, climate change. Climate change knows no national boundaries. Look at air pollution. It doesn't stop at our borders. Look at disasters. It doesn't stop at our national borders. So all these issues are transboundary in nature.
Yeah.
So ICIMOD is well placed, in a neutral, apolitical, way to bring our, people together.
I read about politically neutral as well as trust-based system,
Yes,
right?
Yes.
Now, obviously, politically neutral, I totally understand. We all get it. trust-based system. That is trusting each other, trusting the regions to work together. Is that it?
It's building trust, I would say.
Building trust.
Yes. So, I mean, trust comes gradually. It doesn't happen overnight. But we should not give up because people don't trust each other. Trust has to be earned. So, I think in a way we contribute to that because the starting point is for people to come together. For individuals to come and talk to each other, understand the challenges, understand the opportunities, and then share the experiences. And that is what we do. So that is how we build trust. If you don't even have the opportunity to talk to each other, if scientists from one country is not able to talk to, scientists working in the same fields in another country, how would they share their experience? How would they build trust and confidence? So that is, I think this is the starting point. And if bureaucrats don't get to meet each other, how would they influence their, politicians or decision makers? When they, understand each other, then of course that will translate into convincing. They have the basis for convincing their, political bosses, senior bureaucrats at home. So that's, what we bank on.
You've been in politics for almost, at one point of your life, for almost 3 decades. Has that helped you transition towards this role?
2 decades.
2 decades, sorry, 2 decades, 2 decades.
No, not even 2 decades. Actually, I would say 12 years to be precise. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Has that helped you transition towards this?
Yes, it has helped me also in many ways in understanding the ground realities and also in understanding the sensitivities of each of our member countries. We have 8 regional member countries,
Yes.
starting from Afghanistan through to Myanmar. We have India, we have Nepal, Bangladesh, Bhutan, China and Pakistan. So, it's a complex region. But at the same time, it's a region, endowed with so many, resources, cultural, biological, natural resources like water. I think we are the water towers of Asia.
Yes.
Often referred to. So, when we talk about mountains, we are not just talking about the mountains as we see them, but we are talking about the correlation, the relation between mountains and the plains and the coastal areas and even the ocean. So we have to look at the total picture. What happens in the mountains affects elsewhere. Look at the rivers. 10 of Asia's largest river systems originate from the Hindu Kush Himalayas.
True.
Now, what happens to these rivers will affect the food security, the energy security, and of course water security for close to 2 billion people living in the downstream areas.
Totally, give or take. Totally, how many people are affected in every day? Sir, I just want to understand a number. 2 billion, or is it more than that?
Every day, I wouldn't say. Okay, there's no such thing as that.
How many?
Yes. Every day, the risk of being affected is close to 2 billion people. Okay, that is the risk. So 2 billion people are vulnerable to the changes that are happening up in our mountains, in the Hindu Kush Himalayan regions. Now imagine the Ganges, the Brahmaputra, the Indus, the Mekong, have the source waters in the Hindu Kush Himalayas. So if, we are looking at a situation where you have to deal with either too much or too little water. Too much water, floods and disasters. Too little water,
Drought.
then we have drought. We have, it affects food security. It affects everything, including health, sanitation. So that's the situation we have to deal with more and more.
We have 6,000 plus rivers in Nepal, if I'm not mistaken. Yes,
around that. Yes.
Right. So again, since we are in Kathmandu in Nepal right now, I'll definitely talk a little bit more about us as well. I want to just quickly touch base on a story that that happened yesterday in Switzerland.
Yes.
Just look over this as well. In Switzerland, yes, I believe it was yesterday or within 48 hours.
Yeah, exactly.
If you know about it, could you share a little bit about what exactly happened in the Swiss residence? Zoom out, Babu. Mr. X, show us that. Yes, there you go. So they were prepared with this glacier. Can I call it an
Yeah,
avalanche?
it's a glacier. Yes, it's a glacier failure. I mean moraine, the walls of the glaciers have failed. So the whole glaciers have come down. In the form of a massive ice mass. Yeah.
One of the world's most developed nation, I can put it that way,
Yes, yes.
and they evacuated all their residents, 300 plus residents,
Yes.
beforehand.
Yes, yes. So that is what is called preparedness.
Preparedness.
Early warning system. That is what we lack here. We need to have more of those, so that lives can be saved, please. So Switzerland, of course, they're not also exempted from the impacts of climate change. There's no everybody is going through that. The Alps in in Europe, the Andes in South America, all the mountain areas, are facing the same kind of challenges. Only difference is, if you look at the Alps, countries like Switzerland, or Germany, or France are more prepared for such disasters. And in our case, we are not. We are not. And that is something that we need to invest much more.
I'll jump into this straight up. Sagarmatha Sambad, earlier you mentioned all of us coming together and having a dialogue, having a conversation.
Can I just quickly go back to your
Of course, please.
the question
Of course.
on the rivers?
Of course, of course.
You said Nepal has something like
6,000
6,000 rivers. But how do you define rivers now? Can you call Bagmati a river? What kind of a river can you describe, Bagmati as? So most of our rivers are dead in winter. You don't hardly see any water. And in summer, they become killers. That's the kind of rivers we have now, largely, by and large. Some time ago, last year, I think, or year before, I visited the Koshi River.
Mm.
Then when we reached there and stopped, there was no water flowing in the river bed. There was no water. So I asked my colleague, "Where is the water?" And he said, "It's in the car." So he thought I was asking for drinking water.
Drinking water.
So that's the kind of situation we are in. And in summer, for about 3 months, the very same river turns into a killer river. So this is the kind of situation we are facing now.
Times have changed.
Times have really changed.
Sagarmatha Sambad, sir, what's your take on it and how did it go?
Now, first of all, I would like to congratulate the government of Nepal for successfully hosting the Sagarmatha Sambad. I think it has been in the offing for some time, but it worked out really well. And we are very privileged. ICIMOD feel very privileged that we could contribute and support the event. And in my own assessment, I think it went very well. I think it put the spotlight on Nepal, on mountains, on the challenges that we are facing, on climate change, on air pollution, and so many issues, on loss and damage. So I think in a way, it has brought a lot of attention. Sagarmatha being the tallest peak in the world, so definitely there's a lot of interest around it. And definitely, I think this event has brought a lot of attention on many of the issues that we are discussing today also.
Off the record, we were talking about mountaineering. Off the record, we were talking about it. I want to jump into this slightly. We have some of the tallest peaks in the world within Nepal, and then the whole region obviously has some of the tallest peaks in the planet. Your take on mountaineering, sir? What's your take on it?
Well, I, feel that we have to really look at how we can, have sustainable and responsible mountaineering. Sustainable and responsible. In many ways, we feel that now there is, I would say, tremendous pressure on the mountains. From people wanting to climb, beyond the carrying capacity of mountains. I think there is a limit to it on how many people can go up to the top of Everest or top of any other, peaks. And I always say that Nepal has no shortage of mountains to climb. So my own, sometimes, what I feel is that we should look at probably giving each mountain peak a rest, as I was mentioning to you earlier.
Yeah.
For 8 of the 14 peaks above 8,000 meters are here in Nepal. Why not give each peak a rest, every 8 years? So the industry will still survive, but the mountains will also have time to recover. And I think this can be done. And unless we do that, we're going to have tremendous pressure on the mountains.
Why 8 years? Could we do it every 5 years? Could we do it every 10 years?
If possible, why not, every 5 years? But, again, you have to look at the
business aspect?
Yes, business aspect, the economic aspirations. We have to also create employment. So there has to be always balance. We have to have a compromise. So I can't say what would be the best option, either 5 years or 3 years or 8 years or 10 years. But, at least what I can say is nature can heal itself if you give it a break. During COVID time, we have learned that many ecosystems have recovered during that very short spell of, rest that these ecosystems receive.
I want to touch base on something that I have seen with my own eyes. I closely saw. I'll share a story with you. This is not related to mountains. This is related to something else that's also close to me. It's about corals. As I mentioned earlier, I love being next to the ocean. I remember being at the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. And I remember diving, doing scuba dives with gentlemen and ladies from, slightly older than me. And they mentioned that, Sanjay, we were here 20 years ago. And now we are diving 20 years later. The corals have slightly changed.
Yes.
Even though the preservation has been there, even though I'm sure the Australian government has really worked on preservation for the corals. But I remember them sharing with me that we were diving here in the 90s. The corals were still more vibrant. Now they've slightly decreased. So I'm sure if that can happen to the corals, I'm sure it's going to happen with the mountains too.
Yes, definitely. Definitely.
And I still remember a country giving a break to their tourism in different beaches or different corals, where they would take a break for a few years, let the corals and let the beach revive, and then again have tourists go back with some restrictions. Right. So is that something similar you are suggesting?
Principle, same philosophy, same principle, same philosophy, and same approach can be used. Why not? If they can take responsibility for things that we can't easily see, inside the ocean, isn't it? Below the surface of the, ocean. If they can do that for the coral reefs, why can't we do it for our mountains?
What worries you the most when it comes to our mountains? Is it the amount of garbage that we are leaving there? Or is it the snow caps are melting? What worries you the most?
It's a combination of all these factors, yes, we can always argue that we did not cause this, global warming. This has been the narrative. And yet, at the same time, we don't do what we can do ourselves, we can limit the number of tourists, number of mountaineers going up to the mountains. We can also, regulate the trash, the amount of cans and plastics and all those things that they carry up. We can also regulate the use of energy, for example. So all these things needs to be carefully looked at. And of course, it's not always, what we do up in the mountains that affects the mountains. It's also what we do here. We don't take care of our forest. We let them burn, wildfires. And where do the embers, the black carbon, land on? They drift up and they land up on the snow and ice packs. And that also accelerates the melting.
Yeah.
So what happens is it insulates, and traps the heat, and the process of melting becomes faster. So that is also some, the things that we have to be now very careful. We burn our crop residues, we burn our trash, our industries, the fine dust particles. Where do they land? They land on our mountains. And then the melting of snow and the ice becomes faster.
The ripple effect. I was reading up on black carbon. So, would you elaborate a little bit about black carbon to my viewers, my young viewers, just for their understanding?
Well, black carbon is something, most of us grew, at a time when we didn't have access to gas stoves or electric stoves. So, we used to grow up in a kitchen, fueled by either, wood or, by some kind of biofuel, like in the very high altitude areas, the yak herders, they use dung,
Yeah.
dried dung. Now, when you are constantly exposed to that, in the tent or in the house, in the morning you get up, everything is black. You remember? So those are
Yes.
fine, black carbon.
Yeah.
And then everything around used to be, covered by soot. So that is black carbon. And outside your homes, when you burn your crop residues, when you let the forest burn, and when the carbon emits from the industries, they all go up into the air, and that is something that we don't give enough attention to, because it's something that affects everybody and no one in particular.
Yeah.
So air pollution in our region is one of the worst. I think our cities rank among the
Worst.
most polluted cities in the world. But this is something that we can address. So now ICIMOD is also working on that. We are trying to bring together not just black carbon, it's also the particulate matters, the air pollution, air quality in general. So we are trying to bring the countries in the Indo-Gangetic plains and the Himalayan foothills together to address this through an airshed approach. Again,
Airshed.
Airshed. Have you heard that term before?
No, this is the first time I'm
You
hearing
have
it.
the watershed, you have the
Yeah.
airshed. Because, what happens, the pollution in Kathmandu doesn't necessarily originate here itself. It comes from somewhere else.
True.
Sometimes across national boundaries also. So unless we take an airshed approach, it's not going to help. Because you can, of course we have to take action locally, but unless we link the source and the sink, it's not going to help.
The crop burnings in India definitely affect
Yes,
us every year.
Yes,
And then I'm sure our burnings of our hills definitely affect
Yes.
friends in India.
yes.
Maybe it might be similar to Pakistan, affecting the other side as well.
Yes, depending on the season and the wind direction,
Yes.
it's all related.
Elaborate airshed, please. I also want to understand this slightly, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, that's fine. In simple terms, we just, talk about it as, let's take a concrete example, the wildfires, in Nepal or Bhutan. It doesn't stop in our national boundaries, the smoke, the pollution from these fires, spreads across the region. So that is why, unless we address the cause of the fires in Nepal or Bhutan, doing something in the other countries will not help. So this is the link, and it's also on the the responsibility of the other countries, of the other areas which are affected, to also link that, to recognize that there is a link between the pollution, that is happening here, to what was happening or what is happening elsewhere. So that's why we need to take an airshed approach, an integrated approach. Yeah.
That's something that every day I learn something new, and that's something that I just learned today as well. One by one, I want to talk about a few things and all the science, all the knowledge, all the research that has gone into temperature rise. This is a term that when I was growing up, I never heard. Didn't have
It
that
didn't concern us.
at all. I'm
Yes.
37 years old. In school, I'd never read anything about this. Now it's the talk of time.
Yes, I'm much older, but I also never heard of it before when I was young. So
We cannot predict the seasons now. At least I cannot. Same thing that you were mentioning.
Yes.
We don't know how cold it is going to get, and we really don't know how hot it is going to get this year. And I'm sure for the farmers, it's going to be
Yes.
a headache for them every season. How bad is it? Dr. Pema, I want to understand where do we stand in 2025 and how can we rectify this?
Well, depending on what you read and what you hear, we have already reached we have already crossed the limit set in the Paris Agreement.
Yes, true.
So I think last year, 2024, was sometimes cited as the warmest year on record. So where are we heading? I think unpredictability is probably the right, sort of description. So everything has become very unpredictable. Now we have, instance extreme, heat, extreme cold, and the unpredictable events. You have long periods of drought, and then in our case, look at our monsoon. Before we can, with reasonable accuracy, we can predict when the monsoon would arrive. Now we don't know what happens when it arrives. It comes, the rain comes in buckets, not in drops, and that is the kind of situation that we are facing now. So, yes, overall, the temperature is increasing. But then there are extreme events in between. We have never heard of those, like people dying from heat, when we are young, and people dying from also extreme cold. So those are, manifestations of what the planet is suffering from.
When some friends, when they call it, I call them friends, when friends call them a hoax, nothing like this is happening. What do you say about that?
Beg your pardon? Yeah.
When some friends
Yeah.
say that no, temperature is not
it's a
rising,
hoax.
it's
Okay,
a hoax,
okay, yes,
it's
yes.
it's all a facade.
Yes, that is the challenge. That yes. So there are sections who do not want to acknowledge that the climate is changing, that disasters are happening even, and even when they themselves go through severe weather conditions, sometimes many areas go through experiencing heavy snowstorms or cyclones, windstorms, and so on, but still they don't relate it to the impacts of climate. Don't relate it to climate change. So that is happening, and that is the challenge that people like you in the media has a huge responsibility of convincing them and bringing them on board.
Interesting. I want to, on the same topic, I want to understand your thought process of us getting minerals out of the earth. I want to specifically talk about us changing from being a world which relies on natural resources like petroleum. I just want to keep it and say not oil, petroleum in general, all kind of petroleums that we've been using for hundreds of years now, from mining them, looking for them in Middle East to all around the planet, to now looking for minerals to go ahead and drive our vehicles, or to find minerals and try to go ahead and get into electricity being one of our main resources of modes of energy. How do you think the world is going to change now in the coming decades as we go ahead and look for different minerals to go ahead and run our cars or run our plants? Like, what do you think is going to happen now? Shift from petroleum, shift from oil shift towards more electric, clean energy.
Yes. I think,
how clean is it?
Well, I'm not an expert
I know.
on mineral energy and so on, but I think in general, I think a lot of countries are making a concerted effort, including Nepal, in terms of shifting from dirty energy, if you like to call it that,
Sure.
to clean energy. Now, look at Nepal. There's a lot of electric vehicles flying on the road, and I think there's a big shift. And Nepal and countries like Nepal or Bhutan, we have huge hydropower potential.
True.
Hydroelectricity generating. So we should look at how we can use this clean energy to transform our own, the transport sector, industrial sector, and also the household sector. For clean cooking, I think we should use more of our clean energy. For clean transport, I think we should also develop the public transport system. So if, in mountainous country like Switzerland, if they can run electric trains and, electric trams, why not? Why can't we do? Kathmandu is broad enough. Why can't we have a tram system run on electricity, going around the ring road every 10, 15 minutes? Then we don't need that many cars or that many bikes and so on. So I think that's sort of transformational changes we need to, make. Otherwise, just these small strides will not make that much difference.
We had that back in the day. If you were here in the 90s, when I was growing up, we had electric buses at one point.
So I heard. Yes.
At one point, but now we don't have that.
So I think we have to come up with very ambitious plans. It cannot be done overnight, but unless we have a roadmap, things are going to get worse only.
This is the trolley bus that we had back in the day. I remember being in one of them when I was small.
Yes. And it's very much doable. You have the electricity here. The terrain is good enough, gentle enough. And then the resources are there. So why not plan it, transform into a very friendly transportation system.
A lot of people say that this is not our doing. Like we talked about earlier, this is not our doing. This is the developing nations, the nations that are on a fast track to develop.
Yes.
It's their byproduct that we are dealing with.
Yes, that argument has been, has been there for quite some time. I think we have to change the narrative also.
Okay.
Yes, we have to, make them accountable, and also help us, to address the issues, through investments, through technology and so on. But at the same time, we have to take responsibility. There's so many things that we can do ourselves if we come together as a nation, as a region. There's so many challenges and issues that we can address without waiting for those who are responsible or those who are responsible to come and help us. We can help ourselves first.
I was looking at the budget yesterday. Give or take, our budget of our country is 14 billion, give or take. And out of that, 1.4% was gone to forest and environment, the Department for the Ministry of Forest and Environment, which is 139 million, 140 million, give or take. Now, that was an increase. That was an increase from last year, from my understanding. When ICIMOD directly deals with the Ministry of Forest, Environment, or Infrastructure, or many different ministries that you work with, obviously being politically neutral, what's the suggestion that you and ICIMOD try to go ahead and give to the government when it comes to policies, and how much do they soak it in and then implement it? But this is a straight up question to you, sir.
Yes, Sanjay ji, I think knowledge of the budget allocation and all of Nepal is not adequate enough to comment on that. But what I can say is, it's not just about the allocation to the Ministry of Forest and Environment that matters. It is how climate change is factored into the budgeting of the other sectors. In the health sector, climate change affects all the sectors. So we cannot simply say that allocation to MOFE as an indicator of the government's allocation of funds. It has to be spread across. The agriculture sector, for example, this is much to do with climate change, as we have discussed. So how much of climate change is factored into their planning and budgeting, that is more important. How much of that is factored into the energy sector, for example. Investment in energy is an investment to address climate change impacts as well. So across all sectors, I think. So that what I want to say is the budget allocation to one sector, the environment sector or forest sector, is not a good indicator of the government's, allocation.
So overall, every different sector.
Look at the transport sector. See, the budget provided for the transport sector, the infrastructure sector, for example. Now more and more we are talking about climate-friendly, resilient infrastructure. How much has been allocated for the construction of, good roads, for example? Not that we just have a road which is just bulldozed through, but we have a proper road, proper environmentally, friendly, constructed in an environmental friendly way, sort of following
All the guidelines?
all the guidelines. If we have that kind of budget allocation for the infrastructure sector, most of our problems would also be solved.
So basically, in let's say 100% of the budget, you would definitely love to have a few percentage to go for
Yes,
climate change and thought process of how we could make the country better.
Yes. So resilient infrastructure is a start. I think that's something that is not difficult to sort of plan and allocate budgets also.
I am a big advocate. I want to be very clear on this before I say my next question. I'm a big advocate on growth. We, as a nation, need to have the opportunity to grow, and definitely have infrastructure that, by par, equivalent or even better than any nation in the world. We need to have that opportunity to do that. I'll give you an example of a new airport that has been talked about yesterday, which most probably the government is definitely going to move towards, called the Nijgarh Airport. I'm sure you've heard about this airport that we're thinking of, a mega airport that we're thinking of, we might be building, right? 8,000 hectares of land is going to be allocated for this, and maybe $1 billion is going to be spent on building a brand new airport. What's your thought process on building new things? Building a new infrastructure, maybe a mega project, that is going to affect thousands of people, is going to be used by millions in the coming 10 years or 20 years or 30 years. What's your thought process on things like that when it comes to growth? What suggestion would you have?
Well, I came up with this quite some time ago, building back better, or building for, a better future. As long as it is well planned, and proper risk analysis, opportunity analysis are carried out, you cannot say whether it is, good or bad. But if it is planned properly, it is thought out properly, then definitely, you cannot forego the opportunities. Because look at Nepal and Bhutan now. Many of our youth are migrating out.
It's the same with Bhutan as well?
It's the same. Thousands of youth leaving, for Australia or US or Europe. And that is because we are not creating the kind of conditions at home. I think, of course, we cannot stop them from
migrating
going out in search of better opportunities. But what we must focus on now is to create enabling conditions for them to come back. So that is something that we should do. Policies. What are the policies that could attract them back? What are the fiscal, the financial, the monetary policies that could enable them to start up business, back home? And what kind of job opportunities we could create for them? And I think that should be the focus. So they come back with experience. They come back with a new outlook. They come back with some money for investing in whatever they want to, start up. So this is the kind of thing that we should do, because I always look at Nepal is not a small country. It's a vast country, especially compared to Bhutan. No shortage of land, no shortage of water, no shortage of other resources, no shortage of human resources. Cultural assets, starting with Lumbini, the birthplace of Lord Buddha. You have Pashupatinath, Muktinath, so many historical sites, cultural sites are here. The physical assets, the natural assets like Mount Everest and so many other mountains. Lakes, rivers, as you mentioned earlier. So what is lacking? We need to create these enabling conditions so that we could do better at home. We could provide better opportunities for our youth at home, and that is something that I think the focus should be there. And careful analysis need to be done to see how these kind of conditions could be created. Because, if you have a reasonably comfortable, life here, why would anyone opt to move out?
That's so true. Dr. Pema, we were talking about this earlier. Everybody has ideas, you have ideas just cropping up in your brain, or you have ideas based out of facts. we have a lot of planning, but when it comes to implementation, if it's not done, that idea is just going to be a piece of paper.
Yes. Yes.
You talked about action. Would you elaborate that?
Yes, that is what I shared at the Sagarmatha Sambad also. Sometimes we've keep on waiting for the perfect moment to act. There's no such thing as a perfect moment. We have to make do with what we have. For example, we always say we don't have enough data, enough information. When will we have enough data and information that would suffice everything that we think about? So, in the process, we just keep aside whatever information we have and then go out looking for new information, collecting new data, and so on. Now we talk about, lack of capacity. When will we have the kind of capacity that we needed to do all the things we wanted to do? But then in the process, we just leave behind what we can already do. Lack of investment. And, every time there are reports that the budget is underspent. So there's enough also resources, financial resources to do what we can. And instead of waiting for, a huge amount to come in and then, start doing things, we should already start doing things with what we already have. So I think we have to really focus on implementation now. Implementation. So unless, if you don't take action now, what would cost $1 today?
Yeah.
100 rupees today will cost $1,000 tomorrow. No? So that is why it's very important to take actions urgently, immediately.
I want to touch base on a few things. Glacier loss, temperature rise, impact on water, deforestation, biodiversity, natural disasters. It's a conglomerate of everything together.
Yes.
What worries you the most, and what is ICIMOD actually focused on, spearheading? I'm sure everything you're working towards, but what are you spearheading towards?
Everything is interlinked. But I think if we can address the issues around water, whether too much water, too little water, then I think many of the problems will be solved.
So it's water.
It's water. You talk about cryosphere, the ice, the glaciers, the snow, it's about water. It's solid water. You talk about rivers, it's about water. You talk about agriculture, sustainability, it's about water. Productivity, it is about water. Energy, it is about water. So I think if we can address the challenges, posed by either too much water or too little water, you talk about disasters, it's with water also. So if you can do that, I think many of the others could be resolved.
Very well very well put. I didn't think about it that way. I'm sure my audience didn't think about it that way
either. You talk about health, COVID time. Imagine if we didn't have water. Yeah? First thing they taught us is to wash hands properly. If we didn't have water, what could we have done? So it's to do with health, it's to do with sanitation, it's to do with everything.
What was the thought process? What was ICIMOD working towards 40 years before? I just want to touch base on this. And since now in 2025 we're talking about water, I just want to understand the thought process that we will have 40 years later. We might be watching this 40 years from now. Right now we're talking about water. What were we talking about 30, 40 years ago?
if we still exist.
We might. We might.
Yeah. I think by then, looking positively, I'm sure, our leaders would by then taken enough action to, hold the process of to address the planetary crisis, triple planetary crisis, that is climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. If enough investment, enough, actions have been taken by then, I'm sure we'll have a better situation than now. If not, if you're going at this rate, then it's very difficult to say. We are going, moving rapidly towards our self-destruction. So 40 years from now, difficult to imagine. But we hope that, the situation 40 years later would be better than now.
Than now. Are we? How bad are we, Dr. Pema? I just want to my audience, my young audience globally, to understand how bad of a situation are we at?
Well, we are at a critical situation. That is why they call it, this is the decade for action. So this is the window of, that during which we have to address many of these challenges we are facing. So if we miss this opportunity, this decade of action, then it would be very, very difficult to reverse the process. That is what everybody's assessment is at this stage. So we are at a critical stage. We are at this point where we could make a difference. There is a do or die situation. If we do it correctly now, I think this is the time to do the right things and address the challenges and issues.
To the nations that, or to friends in nations who believe that this is all a hoax, one more time, what would you want to say to them, to political leaders all around the world?
Well, I would like to appeal to everyone that climate change is real, it is happening, and that everybody needs to come together. First of all, recognize and acknowledge this fact that global warming is happening. The temperatures are increasing. The weather patterns are changing. Disasters are happening. And if we acknowledge all that, then come together. Support each other, work with each other, help each other, and create a better world for everybody, a better future for our future generations. So that is my appeal.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I have very limited knowledge on this. I would love my team to look this up as we are speaking in real time. When I was slightly younger, we used to hear this story about the ozone layer. And then the world came together to make sure that we took care of that problem. How true is that? Do you have any knowledge of this?
Well, I think this has been, sort of talked about a lot. The ozone layer, the depletion of ozone, and the need to reduce the, the emission of greenhouse gases. That is why this UNFCCC, UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, came into being, and the process have been moving towards mitigation of these greenhouse gas emissions and so on. So we have the mitigation thing, and we have the adaptation targets and so on. But yes, in general, there is now, widespread acknowledgement, generally. Of course, as you said, there are skeptics, and there are people who call it a hoax, but the facts speak for themselves. We cannot deny what we see, what we hear, and what we feel. It's all there. So I hope that the skeptics would also come around and move ahead instead of moving backwards. And in many ways, we also feel that we are moving backwards. But I think that is not an excuse for us to make an effort to move forward.
40 years since the discovery of the ozone hole by a team of scientists. This is, just go back and look up Koileko Reisayo. This is from, this is from yesterday. So basically 40 years since this.
ICIMOD's age.
World did come together for this, right?
Yes,
World did come together for this.
Yes. See, look at ICIMOD's own history. During ICIMOD's lifespan, if you like. When ICIMOD was created, it was created more, to address the issues of land degradation. For example, land, erosions are happening and landslides are happening, so that, so the narrative was that the mountains, in the mountains, the forest covers are decreasing, and due to unsustainable agricultural practices, a lot of, land degradation is happening. So that was, I think, the principal factor leading to the creation of ICIMOD. So in the descriptions, if you look at some of the earlier publications, it's described as mountains are fragile, mountains are vulnerable, inaccessible, and mountain communities are marginalized.
Yeah.
So fragility, marginality, vulnerability, and inaccessibility. So in the years till now, we have looked at how to address these factors. Now look at some of the communities, mountain areas. I just came back from Mustang, Upper Mustang.
Oh, beautiful.
And I went there 20 years ago. 20 years ago, I went up there on horseback. Yes, I saw it, marginalized. the communities are not as well off as in the other areas. I saw also inaccessibility. You have to go, by foot or on horseback for five days
Yes.
to reach up into Lomantang. And also so that the terrain is very steep, the geophysical structure is very fragile and so on. So fragility all there. But 40 years later, what we see now is, yes, we have increased accessibility. It's accessible by road now. We can reach there in about 4 hours from Gyamtsho. What took us 5 days, now we can do it in
4 to 5 hours.
4 to 5 hours. Okay, so we have created, But did this decrease the fragility? Actually, it has increased the fragilities. The mountains have become more vulnerable now. The landslides are happening. Erosions are happening. So in a way, in trying to address one element, we have actually increased, the risk, the other elements of this. So, look at even communication and internet accessibility, all that. It has both positive and negative effects. So marginality, yes, we have addressed, in many ways. We have brought up the socioeconomic, condition, improved the socioeconomic condition of the communities living there. But at the same time, you look at the other side. A lot of people have moved out, especially the youth. So there are so many things that, which I would call maybe second generation issues that we need to address now.
Yeah. I remember a few years back when I was at Lomantang. I remember standing at the Corolla border, and towards my left and towards my right, there was nothing. There was just a stump.
Yes.
And now, I believe, towards across the border, there's a city. There's a small little city already built. And then I believe down the road, we will also be building a city at that border. So, the world is definitely changing.
Yes, and of course, you can also see many, climate change is not 100% negative. There are also good, some opportunities. Now you look at Mustang in particular. 20 years ago, when I went there, I didn't see any apples growing there. Now, because of the warming, they could also grow apples and a lot of other vegetables and crops which did not exist then. So I think we have to, also look at how we can seize these opportunities and, create the enabling conditions. You cannot just focus on tourism alone. You have to integrate tourism with agriculture, with livestock, with micro enterprises. Then I think we will be able to create more, opportunities for employment and income generation.
Would you love to see clean energy, industries of clean energy in Nepal? Is there a possibility here?
Yes, there's a lot of, lot of possibilities. Nepal is very rich in, as I said, in, hydropower, hydroelectricity. So if we can transform the industries from using fossil fuels, from using coal and other,
means of
energy, replace that with electricity or other cleaner energy solutions. And Nepal is, I think, I would say, done very well in terms of, making use of solar energy. Solar heating system, all this well accepted.
Do you think, like you mentioned earlier, I love this word, dirty energy, do you think this energy source is going to be gone in another half a century? Or is it going to be even less?
Well, I think all the countries, regardless of size, they're, really investing heavily into generating, now clean energy. I've seen, both in India and China, huge areas under solar panel, huge investment in,
in both India and China.
Yes.
1.4 billion on one side, another 1.3 billion on the other side.
And also huge investment in plantations. So a lot of things are going on, which are positive. And I think while their, target to reach net zero is set at, sometimes 2050 or some 2070.
30.
But I think all are trying to bring it nearer, to reach that net zero goal earlier than what they have projected. So I think there are many positive things going on around our region.
Do you think it is going to happen before the targeted dates of these certain countries, the 8
Yes,
countries that we are part of?
yes, I think there are very good indicators that we will reach there before the set, target.
You travel the world, right? You see so many different things all across. You have access to, so many fantastic things that are coming out for the first time. New inventions as well. Any stories that you'd love to share that you've seen across the world that we could implement here, or anybody could implement anywhere in the world, Dr. Pema?
Well, I think you have to start from the basics. No. First, I think we have to take care of our own household. It has to start from our individual household. How we deal with our trash, what kind of energy we are using, and what kind of transport system we are using. So if every individual take responsibility, I think that is what they do in the West. If you look at, they don't eat a chocolate and throw the wrapping.
Wrapping.
Like that. They're responsible. They take it in their pocket and take.
Find a dustbin.
And then the recycling. You see, they have dustbins everywhere. Separate dustbin for plastics, separate dustbin for cans and tins and metals, and separate dustbin for bottles. We don't have that, and this can be easily done. So these are good practices that I think we should start from the less sophisticated, complicated ones, from the basics. And if we can start from there, I think we'll be transforming gradually, looking at all these good examples.
I love what you just said. I know ICIMOD works with local government as well as provincial government and obviously the federal government as well. How has the interconnection between your team and the local government been so far in the past decade?
Yes, I think the beauty of ICIMOD is that we work through partners. We don't have offices everywhere. So every activity that we implement has to be done through our, either local partners or national partners or even regional and international partners. So I would say whatever we do, it has to be integrated. It has to be mainstreamed into the local area plans or national, and it has to align with national plans and policies and national priorities. So that way, I would say our relation is excellent.
Especially working with the local government?
Yes.
How has that been with the mayors, with the deputy mayors, with the wards?
Yeah, we work with several rural municipalities now. We work with the Namabuddha municipality, rural municipality. We work with Langtang rural municipality. Then also with several other rural municipalities.
True. How has it been with Kathmandu Metro? Anything that you want to work with within the metropolitan city?
Yes, unfortunately, because we have focused much more on the rural areas and mountain communities, we have not been able to gain the kind of the partnership, the collaboration at the metro level, because ICIMOD, is a small organization, so we cannot do everything. But our focus is on the mountains and the mountain communities.
Beautiful. In the future, maybe. In the future, as you mentioned about Bagmati earlier.
But you look at Bagmati, we did a proper assessment of the floods last year. So looking at these from the source to the valley itself, what were the factors that has sort of caused the flooding. Sometimes you can also look at the other way around. Disasters are not necessarily caused by natural disaster, nature. Because we encroach into nature's way.
It's us.
Then, yes. So nature strikes back, if you have settlements along the old river bed, definitely the river will come back to reclaim its bed. So that is what is happening. So many of the areas which, if you look at the map, is marked as vulnerable areas, vulnerable to floods. But we keep building on that. So basically, we are inviting the disaster to happen. So I think that assessment would be very, very useful for the metro, authorities.
In the coming months and coming years, the collaborations that you're looking forward towards, and penetration that ICIMOD is looking towards. Anything you'd want to share towards that?
Yes, we would keep on working to build, stronger cooperation at all levels. Particularly stronger regional cooperation because many of these challenges that we are facing, is, as I mentioned earlier, transboundary in nature. So upstream, downstream linkages will have to be addressed. There's a strong connect between the snow and the sea. When the snow melts, where do the water land up?
In the sea.
In the sea. So, when you talk about sea level rise, it's not just about the Arctic melting. It's about the ice and the snow melting in the mountains as well. So there is a strong link, and we have to connect these dots. So I think we have to, work towards building a stronger collaboration between the, coastal areas, the plain areas, the islands, and the mountains. Because right now, what is happening is, it's a bit fragmented. Because islands, of course, they have an advantage that because they are distinct geographical identities, so they, tend to have better basis for collaboration. Whereas mountains are either part of a country or a fraction of a country. So there are very few countries which are totally mountainous like Bhutan or Nepal. So
Yeah.
that is where we need to now, focus on bringing, keep on bringing mountains on the global agenda.
We are always there to support. We are always there to support. And again, like you mentioned, we have to talk about it, come towards a dialogue. Right towards the end, I have a lot of young viewership. So, to my young friends, what would you like to go ahead and say?
Yeah, I just want to have one simple message: cultivate green minds. Okay, and then you'll have a green heart. And if you have a green mind and a green heart, a lot of the challenges, issues that we are talking about could be solved.
And this is for all the political friends that we have as well. The same thing.
Yes, same message.
And action is something that
Yes,
you're
and
very big
urgent
on.
action. We need to act with what we have and not wait for what we don't have, and then by then it will be too late. So urgent actions, immediate actions.
Beautiful.
Is what we need.
Beautiful. Sir, thank you so much for your time. And this is very valuable. And our friendship is going to remain for a long time. And we will support as much as we can.
Thank you very much, Sanjay ji. And, we count on you to take out the, to bring these messages to as many as people as possible.
We definitely will. Thank you so much, sir. हजुर मलाई थाहा छ हजुरको नेपाली एकदम राम्रो छ धन्यवाद
छैन नेपाली आउँदैन धन्यवाद मलाई यो अपर्च्युनिटी दिएर एकदम खुसी भयो अब हाम्रो नेपालमा पनि मैले सधैँ भन्दैछु नेपाल हेज नो रिजन टु बी पुवर सबै छ यहाँ के छ इफ यु लुक एट ल्यान्ड रिसोर्सेस कति छ खेतीबारी जता देख्यो भने त्यत्रो फर्टाइल ल्यान्ड हो पानीको प्रब्लम छैन सो इज अ क्वेसन अफ ओन्ली ब्रिङ्गिङ वाटर फ्रम वेयर इट इज अवेलेबल टु वेयर इट इज निडेड द्याट इज द इन्भेस्टमेन्ट निड पानी त छ तर चाहिएको ठाउँमा छैन चाहिएको बेला छैन त्यसलाई म्यानेज कसरी गर्ने त्यस्तो सोच्यो भने नेपालको जुन प्रब्लम छन् हामीले द रिसोर्सेस आर देयर सो आई सी भेरी गुड अपर्च्युनिटिज फर नेपाल and for the people of Nepal.
Thank you so much for the support.
Before I end, I would like to thank the people and government of Nepal for hosting ICIMOD. It's the, Nepal is the ideal host. We have no problems, bringing the, participants to our meetings and workshops and conferences and trainings together from all, regional member countries as well as from outside. So, and this may not be possible in many other countries. So I would like to acknowledge that fact and thank, once again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sanjay ji.
No. Please call me Sanjay. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for your time. Amazing.